There you go.
This is the Board of Directors meeting of the Marin Mist Water District for 19th of April. I need a roll call.
Director Gibson,
Here.
Director Kohler,
I'm here.
Director Schmidt is not here. Director Bragman
Here.
and President Russell.
Here. Okay, I need a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Any public comment on the agenda?
There are none.
Then we need a roll call.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Kohler,
Aye.
Director Bragman,
Aye.
and President Russell.
Aye.
I'm so confused by this new voting order.
Maybe they're going to change again next time.
I know. I don't know when to like unmute myself now. It's very, really scary.
Yeah, see, it's going to put you in the hot seat pretty
I
soon.
know.
You're gonna be numero uno.
Ah,
Okay, any public comment on the closed session?
There are none.
Okay, then we all need to get out of this and go to the other one. All right,
there.
thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay, we are rejoining the open session. The closed session was adjourned at 6:50 with no reportable action, and direction was given to staff. Okay, so with that, we need public comment on items not on the agenda.
Okay, I have Mr. Roger Roberts. I've enabled his speaking permissions. Go ahead, Mr. Roberts.
I hope you can hear me.
Loud
Yes,
and
sir.
clear, Roger.
As you probably all are aware and know, Measure A to renew the Parks and Open Space Initiative for another 10 years is on the ballot in June. And I would certainly hope that all of you would support that measure, but if you actually wish to get in touch with the campaign and wish to actually become an endorser, you can get involved and do that by visiting www.yesmarinparksopen.com. So I just wanted to alert you to that, and that's the reason why I wanted to make this comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Mr. Ed Jamison.
Hi, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Well, thanks. I have some comments on the last April 5th board meeting. We users got the message on conservation after the 1977 crisis. We're the best in class on indoor use for California's 17 largest counties, according to Flume data. Our outdoor use is half or less of the California average, according to MWD. Realistically, there's just not much more conservation to be accomplished, and we can't afford to count on conservation to materially meet our supply shortfalls. The board needs to focus on planning to supply us users with the water we need to avoid revisiting the terror of last summer and fall. And on the matter of planning, I'd like to correct some misinformation from the last board meeting. Ms. Kohler said that our per capita usage, including commercial and industrial, is in the center of 165 or so districts shown on a slide in a previous meeting. That is correct. But she went on to say that the low-end users were at only 30 to 40 GPCD. That's incorrect. The lowest two districts shown were at approximately 60 and 62 GPCD, 50 to 100% higher than Ms. Kohler stated. That was seriously wrong information that she stated to the board and to us unschooled folks in the bleacher seats. That slide's lowest two districts were in LA inburbs with a lot of multifamily housing and single family housing on very small lots with little to no landscaping, not at all comparable to Marin. We need to hear the correct facts, not biased misstatements pitching ever more conservation. Maybe you board members have all this down, but we members of the public need to be told correct information. And confirming my on-the-fly comments in the April 5th meeting, according to page 40 of last year's 686-page urban water draft report, our usage was 125 MGD in 2010, and usage was unchanged 10 years later in 2020. And the failure to achieve a reduction in average use is not for lack of spending ratepayers' money. The data in the September 21st consultant's presentation that compared our conservation spending to that of 9 truly arid districts indicate.
One more minute.
1 minute?
Yes.
That's fine. Thank you. We are grotesquely outspending truly arid districts on conservation. With this year's budget, an average of 4 times as much in dollars per person served, then in September increased to 16 times as much, and by 3 times as many conservation FTEs per person served. Users in Marin got the conservation ethic 4.5 decades ago, and there's just not a lot more to be squeezed out of our usage other than killing our landscaping, which is exactly what Ms. Culver proposed in the November 16th board meeting when she said that Marin would have a different kind of landscaping that would be, and I quote, landscaping that makes sense for Marin, end quote. You board members were not elected to play big brother in killing our landscaping. You were elected to provide us with safe and reliable supply of water. Kudos to Director Gibson for effectively saying all of that last Friday. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, director's announcements. You want to start off, Ben?
I don't have any this evening, President Russell.
Oh, no. How about you, Mr. Bragman?
Nothing tonight, thanks.
Okay. Mr. Gibson,
Nope, I'm good.
Ms. Kohler,
Nothing for me.
Mr. Schmidt?
Nothing for me either.
Well, I'm not going to let it go without that. We had a doc meeting on Friday. And here's the report out. The committee reviewed and referred funding opportunities to tonight's meeting for approval. The Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act, WIFIA, a California Department of Water Resources grant, a state funding appropriation. And these funds will go to our capital improvement projects, and kudos to our grant staff. They've been doing a great job. The committee reviewed the phase 1 of the Pine Mountain Tunnel tanks replacement in roads and trails contract. These items will be placed on a meeting agenda likely sometime in May for board consideration. The committee also reviewed current water shortage emergency restrictions and related conservation incentives. The video recording of the operations meeting is available on the district's website. Okay, so with that, I need a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Yeah,
Approval of the consent calendar.
and I second it. I want to ask one question on Ben's report on the Division of Dam Safety Phase 2 work plans, whether there's a staff report that describes what our Phase 2 work plans are.
Crystal, can you speak to where we're headed on that, please?
Yeah, we did hire a consultant to assist and to prepare the work plans, and that's the actual like boring into the spillway that we're going to be doing. We'll be doing bores into the spillway to check for integrity underneath the spillways. So that proposal for how we're going to do it and how many holes went to the State Division of Dams, and now we're waiting for their response to get the all clear to perform that that work.
Could you circulate a copy of it to the board, please?
Sure, we could send that to you.
Thanks.
Okay, cool. So we need a vote, roll call.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Kohler,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Bragman,
Aye.
and President Russell.
Aye. Okay, item 10, appointment of finance director.
Okay, this is my item. This is asking for approval to hire and appoint Bretteppendall as a new finance director and treasurer of Marin Water. Briefly, after a nationwide search, Mr. Uppendale was identified as the top candidate, not only the top candidate in the group, but an excellent and very strong candidate. He has extensive background, including 13 years of local government finance experience. He's currently the budget manager for the County of Marin, where he advises the county administrator and the board of supervisors on budget and policy issues. In leads a team in the development, implementation, and monitoring of the county's $680 million budget. He has a BS degree in economics and a master's degree in public administration. So with that, I'd respond to any questions you may have.
I have a question.
Yes.
Did he play college football?
He is currently an attendee and could answer that at some point, or we could move him over.
I
there was
Googled
an
him
up and
and
down,
he came
wasn't
up a highly sought high school quarterback. So it's kind of an unusual name to not be him, but I don't know.
Okay, I will allow him to speak.
He will be able to answer that.
Okay, go ahead, Mr.
Good evening, board, and good evening, Director Bragman. Yes, my name is Bretteppendall. Thank you for this item here to consider my appointment. I did actually play college football at UC Davis. I mostly was a backup. We had a very good quarterback there who ended up going to be a professional and playing for the 49ers. His name is JT O'Sullivan. So in many cases, I got to learn from the best there and learn from a very good tradition of football. But it was a fun time many, many years ago, but definitely worth the experience.
You're very modest. I like that. I'd move approval.
Second.
Roll call.
You want to take public comment, Larry?
Oh, okay. Sure. Any public comment?
There are none.
I knew that.
You may have had some comment about his football career, but
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Kohler,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Bragman,
aye.
and President Russell.
Aye.
Mhm.
Welcome aboard.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Authorize him as a
Yeah.
#1 draft choice.
So you're our number one.
So now we can ask North Corinne, they want to play football, huh?
Yeah.
I like that. We got
Very
a,
much looking forward to it.
ringer.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you. Thank you for applying and joining us.
Yeah.
Okay, number 11, water supply updates.
I'll try to keep the football analogies to a minimum tonight.
Thank you so much.
But I don't know. I'll try. They may just slip out. See if I can get this.
Well,
thing
you
to
probably
go.
think it's soccer anyway. It's not soccer, you know.
We could talk about cricket, but that would really send Good evening, board. Paul Cellier, Water Resources Director with the Water Supply Update. Tonight, our water supply update features sort of the usual suspects, storage, rainfall, and storage projections. But along with a little bit more on the strategic water supply assessment, including, looking at the goals and then diving and drilling down a little bit into some data on demand and taking a look at what the experience that we've had in the water shortage emergency might mean in terms of setting targets and how we might think about those. So without any further ado, the recent rainfall has us really right bang on average. And as you know, there's more coming tomorrow and the day after. So we may pop up above average on the cumulative chart here at the next board meeting. Similarly, storage is really a hair below, it's 99% of I think 99.8% of normal or average for this time of year. So it's a nice position for us compared to where we were last year at this time. Looking forward, our projections, again, if we had.
So does that mean I should stay as president? Is that what you're really saying?
If it's bringing it, if that's what we can attribute the cause and effect to storage, I'm all for it.
Works for me.
I don't know, Larry. I think it rained in December when I was president. So
Well, that was just your handoff to me.
Yeah.
There you go.
Is your gift.
These are definitely policy decisions.
Yeah.
So, but without any further rain this year, we would finish the water year again, right bang on the average that, that we would, of all of our data. So right around 58,000 acre feet on October 1st.
Do you think anybody's as in good a shape as we are? Anybody else?
We got a pretty good reset.
Yeah.
We kind of went back 2 years. Everybody else maybe went back 1 year.
Yeah.
Sort of, in the reset.
And
So-
Paul, your projection that if we don't get any other rain, that's with, again, historic use versus some level of conservation.
No, that actually includes 20% conservation. So assuming that it continues to be dry, we would presumably continue with our outreach programs and incentives to the extent that we're able, and keep, try to prevent any sort of backsliding on the good conservation that we've seen from last year.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So we're not just, of course, banking on conservation. We have done, and the board has authorized a number of items, not the least of which is the Castania pump station rehabilitation. The phase 1 is complete, and this gives us access to an additional 5,000 acre feet or so of water. Putting that in context for our listeners tonight, that's about the size of a little bit larger, about 20% larger than the Bontempi Reservoir. So it's a decent chunk of water. Additionally, our planning group is working with the county to come up with a scheme where we may be able to pump Phoenix Lake to Bontempi Lake. And there'll be sort of a double benefit there of a little bit of flood control maybe. And for us, we may be able to get a few hundred acre feet in terms of water supply. So it could be a nice win-win project there. And our engineering group, I think, through the consultant, is working through the design for the recycled water pipeline out to Peacock Gap, which, when constructed, would bring in somewhere in the region of another 250 acre feet. And so while those are specific projects, we are also working on the strategic water supply assessment. So there's a lot of moving pieces. And these are the goals that we talked about last week. We kind of took a little bit of a dive into the first one, which is really kind of the key goal for this particular project. As you'll note, the rest of these goals, water quality, sustainability, and environmental, they're strategic goals, and they're less directly linked to the project, but nonetheless, once we've evaluated the alternatives, or in the process of evaluating the alternatives, we'll sort of be circling back to see how each alternative really addresses these goals. Not in a kind of a numeric way, but in sort of a plus or minus, does it meet this, does it not, type of way to help us sort through what and prioritize alternatives. So with that, we talked last time again about this water supply goal and sort of the anatomy where we have actions that we'll pursue, and the pursuit of those actions will drive us towards the sort of guiding principle for water supply. And we will try to measure our progress, if you like, using these metrics. And again, in the chevrons here, these would be sort of data-driven numbers that the consultant will be working on to help us with maybe the exception of this percentage rationing, which really may be a little bit more of a policy decision for us to talk about and consider. So the other goals.
Can I ask you, can you
Yeah.
go back a second? I'm a little surprised to see that word rationing. I mean, we haven't, at least in my time on the board, we've never rationed. We've asked people to conserve, we've put conservation requirements in place, but we've never rationed. So I'm a little surprised. I'm asking because it's been bandied about a fair amount in the public, and I think there is now this tendency to conflate being efficient and not wasting water with rationing. So I just want to make sure we're all understanding why you're using that. When you say 20% rationing, are you talking about a 20% reduction in demand due to efficiency, or are you talking about actually literally telling people you can't have any more water than this? Because like I say, we've never done that in my time on the board.
Yeah, what we're talking about is really meeting, if you think about it in a reverse way, is meeting 80% of the demand in a drought. So in a 4-year drought, it's unlikely that we would be able to supply 100% of demand across all 4 years of the drought. So at some point, right, we'll be asking our customers to cut back on their use.
But Paul, if I could, I
Yeah.
agree with Director Kohler. I don't think rationing is really hitting the right mark. I would just say, a 20% demand reduction or something that would
I'm not
capture. what-
Rationing, I'm very uncomfortable with the use of that. Like I say, it's been in the public and we have never, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page here. We have never rationed water here, at least in the years that I've been on the board. We have asked people to conserve and we've put conservation targets in place. Rationing has a very specific technical meaning, which is if you're a business or an institution or a residence, this is how much water you get. This is your ration. And if you, and then you're cut off. That's what rationing is, right? That's not, we're asking you to conserve. I'm alarmed about the district suddenly using the term rationing when what we're talking about is efficiency.
Well, this is the same slide that we talked about last week in some detail.
Well, I was away last week because at my conference, so I didn't see the slide, but
got it.
Are we talking about rationing or are we talking about efficiency? Because
no, this is demand reduction.
Okay, so rationing is not demand reduction. I mean, Ben, do you want to speak to this? I'm just concerned. This seems
No,
like a very significant change
noted,
in our messaging.
Director Kohler, I think it is a good point. We've never used the word rationing, and we're working with a broad team here, not as an excuse. So we'll correct that in future slides.
Okay, that's fine. I just want to make sure that we are on the same page, that we are not talking about rationing. We are talking about.
We are not, and we have not talked about rationing.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, removing rationing.
Thank you.
Yep. Water quality then as the next goal. As I mentioned, it's not as directly linked to the water supply assessment, but still an important feature in both our strategic planning and even in the board handbook and our mission statement. So these actions, again, are draft and for your consideration, where we would invest in appropriate treatment levels for the water supplies, whatever that may be. For example, if it's Russian River water, it's the same treatment that we already have. If it's increasing local storage, it would be similar treatment to what we have now. And then, of course, other options such as recycled water and even desalination have their own treatment regimes. We would operate and maintain district facilities, anticipating that we need to comply with sort of both water discharges from our distribution system, air emissions. So all of these things, land disposal if we're increasing our sludge production with an eye on the environment. And then the third bullet here talks about how we would integrate new supplies into the system so that there really is, it's imperceptible to our customers in terms of the quality of the water. And some of the metrics that we might think about using, obviously there are regulations for drinking water, and we want to make sure that we met both the drinking water and the environmental health regulations. And of course, again, source watersheds, protection of the watersheds is one of the, the first steps to ensuring the quality of the water. And so we want to make sure those watersheds are protected and those processes and ecologies are maintained. And then,
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
In terms of water quality, I also wonder whether there are aspects of into the future in terms of increased temperature or we will have a different climate in the future than we have today, and sometimes that could be an issue for other water quality parameters. I wonder if that's another facet that's being addressed as part of the assessment. And then just to get my questions out there so you can knock them down quickly. Also in terms of resiliency against future disasters in terms of earthquakes. I know that the seismic safety of our, of our water treatment facility is one of our concerns, as well as of risk of wildfire. Just wondering if those are being addressed here in this metric as well, or in some other broader category.
I think it's a good question. I don't know that we've really pondered much about temperature, so we'll discuss that with the Jacobs engineering team. And just to clarify, in terms of temperature, Director Schmidt, did you mean temperature of a particular source water, or temperature from an aesthetic perspective from the customers?
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be. I don't know whether temperature has a particular issue from our source water quality for treatment, but I also think it was just one of the parameters. I know that temperature is an issue when it comes to some of our conservation values, so maybe that'll come up next, but or in this slide. But I just was trying to, as we do this assessment, looking into the future, I just want to make sure that we're really thinking about the future we're going into, that it includes increased temperature, seismic issues, and wildfire.
Yeah,
among other things.
Yeah. Okay, I'll make a note of those. I don't have those specifically on here. These are, as you can tell, the metrics in some cases are fairly broad and non-specific, so we have lots of room to kind of maneuver, if you like.
Sure.
Okay. So just stepping forward to the sustainability and environmental goal, where protect and enhance the biodiversity of the watershed and protect the environment for future generations. Again, kind of a broad guiding principle. And some of the actions, the second bullet, continuing to use the deep green power for marine clean energy, and providing responsible stewardship of land under district management, and balancing existing mandates to safeguard the ecology and the integrity of that ecological system. And here's the comment that you had about to protect against wildfire and maintain water quality. And as you know, we have a number of different initiatives that kind of meet this particular goal, if you think in terms of wildfire and even water quality, when it comes to the BIFIP, the biodiversity, fuel and fire improvement plan that the board adopted, I think, an updated version of that last year. And it's funded at about $3 million a year. So, that would feed very directly into that goal of wildfire. And alternatives that we would think about under the resiliency project may have, similar watersheds, Lake Sonoma, for example, and we want to make sure that there are programs in place to protect that. So some of the metrics, which I think is where you were going, Director Schmidt, in terms of what we would want to be looking at. So ensuring that these source watersheds are protected. It's a sort of a dual goal between water quality and the sustainability piece. And of course, as we think about the alternatives that we'll be trying to evaluate in the strategic water supply resiliency, the use of environmental, social, and economic sustainability indicators that you could imagine we could have a short list of those and weigh the sort of pros and cons of each alternative up against.
This might be a better place for the comment that I made about water temperature for some of our conservation issues, and particularly water releases for fisheries, with a cold water fishery being kind of the operable challenge, I think, in many ways. Are we assessing or looking at our ability to meet temperature goals or requirements as part of our long-term reliability assessment?
I think it's certainly something that we could. For example, to the extent that a water supply alternative would allow us to maybe preserve the cold pool in Kent even more than we already do, then yeah, there might be more colder water that we would be able to preserve in the reservoir. But that would, that'll be a discussion, in-depth kind of discussion on each alternative as it comes up, and what the trade-offs are of the, as we think about those.
Okay, I just think that's given that it's an important requirement, and it's one that it would be good for us to be thinking about if it is an issue into the future, as it is for, frankly, a lot of places, with cold water fisheries, whether we should be identifying these kind of co-benefit projects where we might be able to, as you suggested, maintain a cold water pool, or even increase it to be able to meet temperature requirements. That's the kind of stuff that I think would be helpful for us to be able to look at.
Okay. And then, of course, we heard early on, concern about, are we going to be taking cost into account? And there's a goal around cost in terms of the economic and financial. And again, the guiding principle is kind of a big picture, maintaining and improving the district's infrastructure and operations in a cost-effective manner. And some of the actions that you can see here, right? We're going to leverage federal sources and state sources of funding, grant opportunities, low interest loans to try to offset capital costs. We want to be absolutely ensure integrity and accountability and transparency in the financial management. And that was some questions that we'd heard about already concerning the water supply assessment. And of course, the third bullet. Go ahead.
So what seems to be missing here, or maybe it's implied, is selecting infrastructure options that are affordable, right? I mean, I think it's fantastic that you've called out leveraging state and federal sources of funding, but as you're aware, the current infrastructure package, which is amazing and historic and is unlikely to be repeated, at least I think most observers think that, that's almost all in the form of loans. So that's all going to be at some point in the rate base, right? I mean, again, I'm not looking not looking askance at any of that, but I don't want anybody to be thinking that that's for the most part going to be free money. Even WIFIA, I mean, I'm all in favor of the SRFs and WIFIA, but those are loans. So while it's very important, as you say here, to actively leverage those things, what seems to be missing, and what's there is great, but what seems to be missing is actually selecting options that are in fact affordable for the ratepayers, right? Isn't that the single biggest driver of fiscal health at this point?
I would say it's a very important factor in terms of fiscal health, but so is balancing sufficient water supply. So that's going to, So it's not, I think it's not as simple as selecting the most affordable item. It's sort of selecting the right item at the right time in terms of the alternatives.
Yeah, I think that's fair, but I'm just saying these actions that are listed here, they do not necessarily get us to affordability and fiscal health, right? I mean, if we select a Cadillac version, right, we are likely to not achieve that goal. So I just want to be, it would be nice to have that called out.
Okay. We can certainly do that, Director Kohler. I'm just wondering whether it goes in the metrics or the actions.
I'll let you decide that.
Yeah. Okay, so that's sort of a quick walkthrough on the goals. And again, you'll see more of these on the 26th. But so that, at least it's not the first time that you've had the opportunity to kind of think through them. And so hopefully they'll be a little bit more familiar for you on the 26th. And we'll try to incorporate some of the changes that you've suggested this evening. So changing tacks a little bit, as we think about the water supply assessment, and we were talking a minute ago about how much demand we can meet in a 4-year drought, or is it a 5-year drought? What's the Jacobs engineering team review of sort of paleo history and local drought records going to come up with in terms of what is the right number in terms of duration of a drought? What demand will we be able to meet? So as we just wanted to start thinking about demand just in general for the district, and obviously, what we want to think about as well when we talk about demand is demand management or water conservation. And so to help try to think about this, we were looking at this table, which is from our urban water management plan. On the left of the table is basically the type of use, right? So single family, multifamily, and so on. Landscape here is just, I'm not sure why they called it landscape, but it's really dedicated irrigation meters. So what we've been saying, and as you know, through our experience last year, we've kind of been focusing on outdoor usage. So this table shows us total usage, and this box on the right, 20,000 or so acre feet per year of total usage between these three, single family, multifamily, and these dedicated irrigation meters. So then let's look and see what component of that is outdoor use. And this is a chart that breaks it down nicely for us. So you can see the breakdown here from the three types, landscape, other, which is this category that includes what's referred to as real losses, i.e. leaks, hydrant breaks and things like that. And then there's a component that's sort of a calculated losses. In other words, it closes the balance between sort of build water and production water. Because there's a certain amount of error in large meters and things like that, and those can kind of compound. So it's difficult to know, again, without sounding like Donald Rumsfeld, what's really, the real losses versus, the sort of unknown losses. But anyway, I digress. The total volume, it looks like, for this irrigation or outdoor landscape use is about 10,500 acre feet. So as we think about that, so the irrigation meters, right, 1,500 or so acre feet, these are our parks, our schools, ball fields, and there'll be some minor reductions that we can achieve there through efficiencies and education opportunities, and maybe even some replacements. Somewhere around 10% seems likely. And then that category of losses and other, the losses tend to dominate, and I think minor reductions there will be possible, somewhere on the order of 5%. And so thinking then about the single family category, which is the largest number, and so single family outdoor water use is about 6,268 acre feet. And the question is, how much reduction can we achieve, and over what time frame? So we don't really have any specific data that we could draw on apart from our most recent, which was this, during the water shortage emergency, the turf replacement program, where we increased the incentives from $1 to $3 was really very successful. And we reached some 460 customers in what felt like a fairly short period of time. And that represents 1% of our residential connections. And and the water savings as a direct result of that was around 37 acre feet. So if we were to take that rate and extend it over a period of 10 years, we would expect to achieve a 10% participation in that program and a reduction in demand of around 400 acre feet. Now, not all of the single family outdoor irrigation is turf. There are some obviously non-turf areas, and we could, hopefully have programs where we're going to educate customers, convert those over to drip, ratio controllers, more efficient irrigation. So we'll be, trying to work on that and thinking that maybe we can get 100 acre feet or so out of that. And then, as I mentioned previously, in terms of the landscape and the losses, on rough percentage terms, what we think we might get there. As we look at this and think about it, that reduction then over a 10-year period is about approaching, 800 acre feet. So again, this is just the data that we have. And it suggests that based on that analysis, that maybe a target to think about for sort of this normal year, long-term conservation target for single family outdoor water use and these other water use categories, the losses included in there, would be somewhere on the order of 1,000 acre feet over 10 years. And in 20 years, obviously, we would be doubling that. So that's just kind of a preview and a quick look at how, some of the data indicate what we might expect from, in helping us think about developing a target for outdoor water use savings.
Can we talk about that a little bit? I very much respect your, wanting to be data driven, but I also think this is policy and financially driven, right? I mean, the suggestion that it's going to take us 20 years to not even obtain 1,000 acre feet in conservation, in water use efficiency saving outdoors, it seems remarkably modest to me, given what we're seeing around the West. I mean, the success that we have in this area is directly related to, it's a number of factors, but certainly it's a matter of how much we're spending, right? I mean, we can certainly, without putting any mandates in place, right? Assuming we're going to stick with, and I think we should stick with, a voluntary program. We've basically maintained almost flat water use, notwithstanding growth, with very, very modest investments over the last decade. If we increase those investments, if we increased our outreach, if we made a concerted effort, right now, I guess here's what I'm confused about, Paul. Right now, it seems like you're saying we're basically going to remain at the status quo. The status quo, well, tell me if I'm getting this right. You seem to be suggesting in this presentation that the status quo of about 120 gallons of water per person per day is demand, more or less, and that's the right level of demand, and we're not going to try to seriously reduce demand in a permanent way. In a drought, 20% is all we're going to try to do, if I'm understanding you correctly. And here, we're not even going to try to get to 20% efficiency on outdoor water use for another 20 years. We're not even going to get to 1,000 acre feet. It's surprising to me that this is such an unambitious goal. So can you talk a little bit more about that? Because it's certainly not immutable, right? When we started this conversation when Larry Russell and I started this conversation and we joined the board about 15 years ago, we were told, well, we're going to need 36,000 acre feet, and we're right about 25,000. So I think I'm just surprised that we're not talking about more, a more ambitious approach, certainly in light of what's happening around California, what's happening around the West, and it's certainly in light of climate change. I'm sure you're aware the recent IPCC report just came out, and I don't want to get too far afield, but I'm very surprised that you're only talking about 200 acre feet a year.
I'm confused as to actually what it is we're talking about here. Is it a goal, or is it simply a working model?
It seems that I thought we were talking about a goal. Isn't that what this is? You're looking at, I'm just rounding up, Paul, but you're talking about 800 acre feet of savings as the goal for 10 years.
We're really talking just about what the data that we have from the water shortage emergency, and based on the incredible outreach effort that was made there, the expenditures that the board authorized during that period of time.
About $1 million. That's all we spent.
And what we were able to achieve. And that's what's reflected on this slide. It's not meant to be aspirational. It's just sort of, here's what we've been able to achieve in the water shortage emergency, when you would hope that participation would be fairly high. And then
but people don't turn on a dime. My point, I appreciate the focus on data, but like you say, this was an emergency. It wasn't a program that we put a lot of money into. It was $1 million. It was a tiny, tiny fraction of our budget, right? We're talking about spending hundreds of millions of dollars on other water supply reliability options, right?
Potentially.
Could I think Jack asked an important question, which I'm not sure we got to, which is, is this the base? Is this the number that you're putting into in the model that just says in the out years this is what we're as a baseline, absent a well-funded or more funded effort on conservation. This is what we'd assume business as usual would get us. And then, and if the answer is yes to that, then would another facet of this analysis be, what if we invested more money into conservation or demand management, and we could bring this down even faster? But so I'm just trying to figure out, is this just what we're assuming as a baseline, not assuming a more robust effort, or is this setting a goal?
Well, it says developing a target for demand management. So that's exactly what I've been trying to get at here. It looks like that is the target that you are asking us to approve. Well, maybe not approve, but that's the target you're proposing.
Well, if I could jump in, Paul.
Yep.
This is really just the way Paul and I were thinking about it. It's just an ongoing discussion with the board. And we did want to break it down from a data standpoint, from our thinking, as Paul noted, that, there was a considerable effort in the water shortage emergency, almost crisis that we were in, of outreach. And that's the response we got that was far higher than we ever got. And here's what the numbers translate to. The other point I think that's important in context of this discussion is there is a distinction of how we want to think about demand management in context of this water supply assessment and looking at long-term potential needs for the district, distinguished from perhaps some other goals we established to drive conservation further in a variety of ways that may have uncertainty because we don't have data associated with it. So a lot of this, in a way, is a risk-based discussion as well.
I think we still don't have an answer to the question, though. It looks like you're saying this is the target for demand management. So I think we all understand, this is super clear, that this is what happened in this emergency situation, but we only spent $1 million, right? That's all. And there were good reasons for that. I'm not being the least bit critical. I'm just saying this was not a program intended to achieve a particular long-term demand reduction, lowering waste target, right? It was a response to an emergency. So I think it's fair to use that as data, but you seem to be going beyond that and saying, this is what we're going to use to develop this target, and that's going to drive this assessment. So the concern that I have, just going back to your prior slide, is we're talking about, and probably very reasonably, setting a goal of, a 4-year supply, but we're not assuming any more than a 20% cutback. And now we're talking about a demand management target that's, it's got to be one of the more modest ones that I've seen in California. 200 GPCD a year, that's it. I understand the data, but I also think the data, what you do in an emergency situation and what you do when you're developing a plan like this and you're putting funds behind it, is going to be a very different thing.
But could we break this down and just get some? So is this just the model assumption that this is what is going to happen with demand management absent a program? That's not the right question either, huh? Maybe I'll just, when a previous conversation that we've had around how to look at conservation as a project is to look at, if we do more or less business as usual going forward, this is what our water use will be. Whether we need a future increased supply through an intertie or groundwater or conservation, we want to be able to see what is the cost per yield of these different measures. So if this is just the baseline assumption around which we can then see what the cost per yield of different measures is, then I don't want to sweat a whole lot. I feel like it's kind of getting we're parsing a lot of hairs, because this is not a goal. This is just part of the baseline, but I feel
I'm
like it's
reading the
confusing.
words on the page and the words, and
I
I
know, but
cannot
let's-
seem to
but
get an
let's-
answer to my
But
question.
I think
I
Paul
just
has
keep getting
not-
interrupted. It says
Right.
developing a target for demand management.
Yeah,
Right.
it doesn't
So-
say this is the target. It says developing a target. That's the process we're engaging in. What we have been given are data points. So we have to develop the target and then we have to tweak the data points to decide how we meet the target.
Right.
The data points aren't necessarily the target.
Well, I think that's what we keep not getting the answer to.
So let's
Well,
let Paul and Ben try to help us, because I think you guys understand we're confused. So maybe you can try to
Yeah,
help us.
I'll start, and Ben, you can clean up when I mess it all up again. This is, as Director Gibson noted, this is just a set of data points that we have from our experience in the water shortage emergency. Based on, we know how much we spent, we know how much water we saved, we know how many customers were involved. If we were able to repeat that over 10 years, this is what we would expect. And of course, the board can invest more. And as Ben noted, there is uncertainty in whether that, if you double the investment in conservation, do we double the savings? Right? We just simply don't know at this point. So these are data points that we have, and we're happy to adjust these targets any way that the board see fit.
And I would add that this is a important discussion, obviously, which is why we're bringing it. And to some extent, it is the crux of some policy ultimate decisions that do need to be made, as has been pointed out, for the water supply assessment. So what we're trying to do tonight is bring the board some data to get feedback. We are not assuming we can sharpen our pencils on indoor use. We could make some assumptions that we don't have a great way to validate on being able to achieve a higher level of uptake from customers with a higher rate of investment. In fact, to say that we would get the same amount of participation for the next 10 years that we got this last year in this water shortage emergency may itself be a stretch. We really don't know. So we do believe conservatism to some extent is important, and I do want to distinguish, but I think the board does understand that this won't constrain certainly our water conservation activities or moving that in a more aggressive way. The real question is, how would the board want us to, or what data would you like to see, other than perhaps saying, well, if we went from $3 to $5 an acre foot, we would get that proportional increase in uptake. Again, not having the data to support it. In a way, we feel it was fortunate last year that we do have this very strong data point, although I do think Director Kohler is right that people don't turn on a dime. So there may be a way to get a higher level uptake. And so some of it is how much data does the board want to utilize? Certainly all the other options will be, pure data driven. In demand management, how should we be thinking about that collectively, but certainly from a policy standpoint in terms of data or just kind of assumptions or looking what others have been able to do and assume we'll be able to get there. Because if it does change significantly from these numbers, that does raise uncertainty in terms of our ability over time to achieve them.
Could
So,
I
for
ask a
example,
question?
if I could just finish my point. So on data, just very quickly, there actually is quite a lot of data. I appreciate this is our data, but there's a lot of data out there. For example, just Flume and Ratio have got studies showing 10 to 15 to in some cases 20% in communities that are using their devices to help people change their behavior and change their relationship with water. the Pacific Institute just came out with a stunning new report about the potential for water use efficiency just in California that was just released in the last week or so. So I very much understand the instinct to, and I think it's the correct instinct to start with the data from our experience. But I think our experience was unusual, right? It was a drought emergency. So I'm saying to be conservative is to caution against using just the data points that were developed in the last year. There is 4 decades worth of experience, and certainly much more recently experience with various types of efficiency measures that are very well documented, and I think so there's always going to be, Paul and Ben, some level of uncertainty, but there is a huge body of research out there that we can and probably should be taking advantage of before we say, well, we just don't know. It's just so uncertain. I mean, there's quite a lot of data at this point about what kinds of programs, the relationship between price and uptake over time. I mean, there's a lot of support for water use utilities out there to get that kind of information.
Okay, so you kind of captured what I was going to say, which is, I think, and I think your points are very well taken. And I think we should be looking for data outside of our own district to have some comps to see if we can, if the board can capture some reasonable aspirational goals that are data driven, perhaps from, data from outside our district. So I think it would be helpful for me, at least, if Director Kohler could circulate some of those studies to staff so that we could create a bit of a compendium of examples for the board to consider. I think it would be very helpful, and it might expand our horizons as she's suggesting.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. Thank you for suggesting that, Larry. And I think it's really necessary, because I would hope that our consultants are looking at examples outside of our district for innovative ways that we might use conservation as one of our means to increase our water supply, so that we can see it as a, as we've often debated about, like as a capital project. If we're going to look at conservation as a tool to meet our future water need, I think I personally would like to be able to see it as, in comparison to other of our objectives or other options, so that we can make the most cost-effective and reliable selections as we move forward.
Yeah, and I'm not, criticizing the data that you're putting forward. I think it's pretty sobering, actually. So I think it would be very helpful for me, at least, and I think a couple of the other board members, just to kind of expand our horizons with some outside examples.
Okay, we can, I think, take advantage of that and bring some of that information to the board. So Ben did raise sort of another question that we had talked about last week, which was how do we want to think about conservation in the context of the water supply assessment? And I thought I heard a comment just now, Director Schmidt, indicating that we would want to be able to compare conservation to the other alternatives, and that's certainly what we're planning to do. The question, slightly different, is would we discount that conservation goal or aspirational goal, I think Director Bragman, you called it, from whatever water supply need gets identified? So it's how are we, that certainty of achieving that conservation target over the 10 years versus setting up the program to achieve the aspirational goal and funding it and the outreach and everything that goes with that. But where do we fit that in terms, how are we going to want to think about that in terms of, discounting the water supply shortage that gets identified, if one is identified. That's the challenge, I think, for staff at this point, is thinking about how we want to address that.
I agree.
Seems to me,
I think that is the challenge, but I just want to ask you, Paul, once again, I keep trying to get a response to this and I'm not yet being successful. So let me
Sorry.
ask it differently. When we joined the board 15 years ago, we were told we absolutely had to have 36,000 acre feet of water. Do you still think that's the case today?
No, I think our demand, as we've seen, is approaching, 26, 25,
Right.
26. Yeah.
Okay, so would it have been prudent for us to have put a water supply assessment in place at that time designed to achieve an average year supply of 36,000 acre feet?
I think the board did have a number of water supply options in front of them. One of them was, I think, desal, right? And then the other was the demand management that the board selected to fund, the Madaus report, as I recall, in 2007 or so. And so
I'm just saying
that-
demand. My point is just that we could have done that at tremendous cost to the
Right.
district, right? And we didn't. And somehow we've all managed to have quite a nice life. We have not seen the collapse of civilization. We have not seen some disaster in the district in terms of our ability to live and work and play and have landscaping. So what I'm saying is, what seems to be an immutable, target we have that data as well, right? That was not necessarily the case. So I'm cautioning, I'm concerned about the notion that where we are today is where we must be, that is the only level of demand or the appropriate level of demand, and that all of our efforts should be geared to that number. And that's, unless I'm misunderstanding, I guess that's what I need. That's what I'm looking
Yeah.
for. Seems to be what you are suggesting.
I think that that number, that 25,800 acre feet, is just the data point. It's the 3-year demand average that we have. It's
Right.
going to
Right.
change over time, and we've seen it kind of wobble around, right?
Right.
So that number has been pretty steady for 24, 26 for the last
With
several
very,
years.
very minimal investment in long-term demand reduction, wouldn't you say? I
So
mean, $500,000 or less a year out of a budget of,
yeah, it's the conservation group has done an amazing job, I think, over that
they
period of
truly
time.
have. They truly have.
No question
agree.
about it. I don't think that developing a water supply resiliency plan should be viewed as immediately, discounting any value that conservation demand management brings. In fact, the opposite. I think it's going to be one of the options that we have. And the policy question for the board is, at what level would we fund it? And how should we think about it in terms of the water supply planning that we've got to do? Right, we'll be talking soon about the growth and the number of housing units that are going to be, squeezed into Marin, at least if those numbers are real, and they seem to be, but who knows, they may change. But if we take them at face value, there'll be a certain amount of growth and water demand associated with those. So how do we want to think about demand management? And it's entirely possible that if conservation is funded and is successful, we may be able to, defer investments in water supply projects.
I assume
Clear.
we're
I
not
totally
talking
support there
about
being water supply
alternative-
projects. I just think we need a realistic target for where we need to be.
I assume we're not talking about alternatives here, either new water or conservation. I mean,
Right.
taking
Right.
both roads.
Right.
I couldn't agree more, Jack. I think we are taking both roads, but I think we need to have a demand target. Again, that's what this is. All these slides are about developing a target. So I think we need to talk about, I guess maybe if I had any concern about this slide and the other ones, it's the word A. I don't think there should be a target. I think we should have a range of targets, because if you have a range of targets, then you have a range of scenarios to work from. And I'm concerned that we seem to be talking about a target that basically is the status quo, as if that is perfect. And I haven't seen any data suggesting to the board that it is.
I think
Yeah.
we're getting the cart a little in front of the horse here. It seems to me this is a conversation that would be best pushed off to the 26th
Okay.
when we have Jacobs. I think these are pertinent issues. My engineering judgment tells me that we plow forward with a reasonable water demand, and any conservation we get is on top of that. It's a good thing to have, but I think we have to plan for a good number, whatever that number is, for demand, and design our supplies to match that demand. And then, like I say, if we can do better than that, that's great.
Right.
But I'm hesitant to do more than set a goal to reduce our water demand. I just don't see it as a planning tool necessarily. Hard and fast. It's better to just have a good, best engineering judgment number, and then if we do better, we do better. We can push things off, as Paul said. But I really do think this is a conversation that might be best pushed off till the 26th.
I'm happy to do that, and it's rare for me to disagree with you, Larry, but my concern about what you just said, and maybe I misunderstood you, that conservation is just gravy, that we should just be happy if we get it, is that then if we had followed that 15 years ago, we would have spent hundreds of millions of dollars that we have put into our infrastructure, that we have used to support, maintaining our system, that we have used in incredibly constructive ways on getting us to 36,000 acre feet, which is not where we are and not what we need. So I actually do think that having a number that's a reasonable number, that's an honest number, is enormously important. And I think we need a range of those numbers. I don't think I just don't agree. I don't think it makes sense in this time of climate change for us to be saying, we're just going to go with the best engineering number as if the status quo is the number that we're going to need for the next 50, 60 years. I mean, if we need data about anything, we need data about that.
Those are apples and oranges, though. We don't have data about the future. We only have data about the past, and we're going to have to use judgment to see where we're going. But
I agree.
But also think about this: had we gone forward with the 36,000 acre feet per year, we wouldn't be where we are today. We wouldn't be having this discussion, huh? We would have overcapacity. We'd have overcapacity, but we wouldn't have to cut. Well, yeah, sort of. I mean, it depends on how you bring it in. If it's coming in from a remote location like the East Bay or from Russian River, you can just tone it down, right? It doesn't have to be, you're not necessarily building something to get it. You're not building $100 million project to get it. I mean, this use of the Castania pump station is a perfect example. For $1.5 million and probably a $500,000 a year operating cost, we're basically matching the desal flow. So, with more creative, and I'm all in favor where Ben is going with this, putting in more efficient pumps in Castania, we can do even better. So there are many ways to skin a cat. And
I agree with that. And system efficiency is fine, but that's not what we're talking about here for the most part.
No, that's a supply though. It's not efficiency, it's a supply. It's instead of 5,000 acre feet, maybe we get 7,500 acre feet.
Yeah.
Out of the same pump station. That's what I'm talking about.
Right. I meant system efficiency. I didn't mean conservation, but yes.
Okay.
Right. We are talking about the same thing, system efficiency, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Right. But I think planning for 36,000 acre feet when your average demand is less than 25, I think that's an enormous burden on ratepayers that we should care about. I think that would have been incredibly irresponsible of us. I mean, we've been able to put that $200 to $300 million into the system. That's why we've been able to replace the tanks. That's why we've been able to do the upgrade at the treatment facility for earthquake safety. That's why we've been able to do, everything we've been talking about on the watershed. That's why we've been able to replace the number of pipes we've been able to replace. It would have been a massive increase in rates to do that on top of overbuild supply.
Right. But if we had more vision at the Castania pump station to begin with,
Well, I
and
agree with you
more,
about Castania. Castania to
Yeah.
me is an easy thing. I'm talking about overbuild. Castania wasn't going to get us to 36,000 acre feet.
that's not so clear.
What's 5,000 acre feet? We're at 24, 23, 25 today. Anyway, I'm
Right,
just,
right.
the numbers are,
But yeah, go ahead. In any case, why don't we continue as the 26th? I have
Okay.
confidence that Jacobs is going to cover this
okay.
in depth. So, I think that's a good place to push them. I mean, if others disagree, I'm happy to continue this conversation, but I think we've got probably a half an hour to 45 minutes of public comment to get in here too. And I'm happy to go as long as you want to go, but I think we should get that comment in here and let's hear what they have to say. Unless you guys see it different, or Ben, you see it differently.
No, I think that works. And it's not only on the 26th. We'll be having this discussion, I suspect, for quite some time. This is really, one of the key foundational issues going forward, and there'll be plenty of opportunity.
So everyone cool? Well, go ahead, Paul.
No, I'm just gonna, the last slide here, President Russell, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so just quickly summarizing the rest of it, and Ben noted, right, working session a week from tonight, virtual session. We'll be talking goals, targets, process, and kind of giving some previews into the evaluation stage. Alternatives we'll be talking about in May and June, and the roadmap in July. The storage levels are looking good, really right on average for the time of year, and that's where we kind of expect to finish the water year at this point, even with no additional rain, but also assuming a certain level of conservation, around 20%. And our whole discussion tonight, and I want to thank the board for the discussion around this sort of outdoor water use and thinking about targets, and we'll certainly avail ourselves of outside data. And then, our messaging to our customers continues to be to use water wisely in the short term, and that we are pursuing long-term water supply resilience.
Yeah, and to cut wastage. I mean, that's the clear one. That's the key to this whole thing. Also, I think we should be sure to send these slides to Jacobs and suggest that they monitor the board meeting, just so they can hear this conversation, so we don't have to go through it again.
Yeah.
I think they would find it useful.
Yep.
I agree with that, just as long as Paul is sure to change that messaging about rationing.
I will do that right now.
Okay, any other board comment for the moment? Cool. Can we hear the public comment, please?
Yes, there is one right now. Ed Jamison, go ahead. I've enabled you to speak, sir.
Hi, thank you. President Russell is spot on with this. He's apparently done some forecasting in his career, as well I have as well. So I respect numbers. I think they have a certain sanctity to them. They're the pivotal issue to getting a handle on this whole problem. I'll come back to that in a minute. There was some discussion about other reservoir levels. Sonoma was at 57% last week. They did not have the benefit of the October rains, apparently. I'm not an expert on that. But they did have a webinar 3 or 4 weeks ago where they said a couple of dairy farms had gone out of business for lack of water, and everybody up there is on conservation still. They are, unlike us, nowhere near 90 some odd percent. I had previously asked to make sure that Jacob's study includes shutdown and restart costs on desal, as well as the maintenance costs while it's shut down. I had forgotten to ask for what percent of capacity desal could be ratcheted back. Can a plant be ratcheted back to 85% without suffering damage to the equipment, or 50%? I read or heard somewhere last week or 2 weeks ago, 10 or 20%, which doesn't square with anything I've ever heard. But Jacobs needs to tell us, what is the realistic expectation for ratcheting back desal capacity, whether it's 50% or 80% or whatever that number is. Jacobs also has to be careful in its exploration of the pipeline to the East Bay. to fully explore and explain and understand the East Bay pipeline restrictions that they adopted on December 14th by their board. It included any Sonoma water has to be used for indoor use before they supply any indoor use. And if I understand the wording on there, it was on a very hard to read chart that Paul presented back in October 19th or 21st, probably. I believe they made it clear that they would not give us water until all our other exhausted water had been exhausted, some reservoirs in Sonoma. Also, the requirement that.
1 minute.
How long?
1 more minute.
1 minute.
Okay. They also required that we support their low-income programs. I thought Paul Cellier's analysis of outdoor demand potential for reductions was really outstanding. I thought he really got a great handle on the whole issue. On outdoor demand, there was a slide presented at the November 9th East Bay Mud meeting that showed us at half or less than half of the California average for irrigation. The board should see that slide plus a full year if the district has that info available. As for the old 36,000 acre feet we keep hearing about, somebody really blew the forecast big time. The truth is we've been at 200 or 125 GPD per customer since 2010 to 2020. We've got no reduction over that 10-year period. And we're down to now getting trivial conservation plans, spending a lot of money to try to get 160 acre feet a year. And finally, we need a realistic forecast for this exercise, not a goal-setting aspirational process, or we will revisit the crisis of last fall. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no further speakers.
Okay, well, I guess I guessed wrong. Okay.
I
So with
apologize.
that-
Mr. Roberts raised his hand. Oh, I'm sorry. Baron Hamill raised her hand.
Okay,
Go ahead, Ms. Hamill. I've enabled your speaking permissions.
Thank you. I apologize. I did not raise my hand, but I want to take this opportunity now that I'm here to thank everybody for how much work they've been doing and hope that we do not have a sense of amnesia about the past as we look towards the future. Thank you again for your support.
Thank you.
thank you.
And I think Roger Roberts was trying to leave a comment. Go ahead, Mr. Roberts.
Yes, it is just a comment. The Water Resources Board has talked about a goal for the state of 55 gallons per person per day. Now there's an aspirational goal for you. And I would suggest that it might be useful for the analysis of resiliency and investment in conservation and capital projects and the rest can be framed quite easily by choosing some numbers for scenarios of 100 gallons per person per day. What does that mean? 75? What does that mean? 55? What does that mean in terms of strategies to meet that level of demand, those various levels of demand? And I would like to suggest that that's something that Jacobs ought to provide. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Okay, well, with that, I intend to move on if everybody's cool. Yep. Okay, good. Thanks. That was a spirited discussion. I enjoyed it. I hope we all did. On to item 12, revised 2022 calendar of board meetings.
Good evening, President Russell and board members. I'm going to walk us through just the two issues that need to be considered. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Loud and clear.
A little different being here. So last meeting, we discussed two items. One was the shifting of the May 10th regular board meeting, which had been adopted on the 2022 calendar for the board at the beginning of the year, shifting that regular meeting to May 3rd. That would free up May 10th board meeting night for a special meeting to continue our water supply assessment discussion. So that's the first item, is just making an adjustment to the 2022 board calendar. And then the other item that we will mentioned and have agendized tonight is the start time for the meetings, the regular start time. We had a pilot project of 7 p.m. For about 6 months, and there's been some interest in revisiting whether that's working for the board as opposed to the 7:30 PM start time. So it's up for the board to consider both of those items tonight.
Well, since I started the ball rolling, my thinking process was that we had a series of late running meetings, which is why I recall we moved the start time up to 7. I don't think we have that problem or that issue at the moment. I think we're running on a pretty good schedule to get these board meetings put through on regular time. If we had started at 7:30 tonight, it would now be 8:50 instead of 8:20. But I'm open. Like I say, I started the ball rolling, so I've made my pitch on this pretty heavy. Now quiet down and let others talk.
I think that, personally, I think that the 7 o'clock start time has been better. I think that this is an exceptionally light agenda for our meetings, and we have in the coming months, we have some really substantial items that I think are going to lengthen our board meetings again, both with the water supply assessment and our cost of service analysis and other things. So I guess it's all part of it is a matter of preference, but I also part of a goal of these is finding a time that works for, I think, our community and for the people who want to participate. So my preference would be to stay at 7, but I'm very eager to get to the part of the conversation where we hear from others who have chimed in.
The only time 7 is a problem for me is when we have a 6 o'clock closed session. Starting at 6 is a problem. Starting at 7 is not.
I would just add, I really think Monty kind of captured my concern, which is what's best for public participation. I tend to think it might be a little bit of an earlier start time. For my own convenience, 7:30 would be easier, but like I said, it seems to me a little bit of an earlier start time might be better for the public that chimes in, that tunes into these meetings. So that's kind of where I am.
Perhaps, although keep in
That's
mind,
where I
as
am
long as
too.
we have the hybrid meetings, we cut off the transport time, huh? So,
Yeah.
it's a different animal at
Yep.
this point. Okay, well, I think, and Cynthia, would you have more to say, or you're happy with where you
I
are?
was just agreeing with Larry and Monty.
Okay. You can obviously tell I'm a fan of the 7:30. I find the 7 o'clock jams my schedule.
What about
With
staff?
that, can we?
Does staff get a vote?
Yeah.
No?
I don't think we really do. Certainly, I would say earlier is better, but we accommodate the board and the public. I do want to just speak briefly to the closed session. We have tried, I think maybe this meeting would have been a good one to do after, and that would lessen the impact that Director Gibson noted. Where we can just do it following the meeting instead of prior.
Mm-hmm. That is the way we've done it for years, but
Historically, yeah, that's always been the way.
yeah.
Okay, with that, can we get the public comment?
There are no raised hands.
Well, as I suspected, it's kind of in our court here to decide what to do. How do we move forward, Molly?
Well, I'm not necessarily hearing a consensus for a motion to change the start time. It sounds like we want to just let the 7 ride for now, but we can certainly revisit it.
I'm not so sure I agree with you on that one.
Okay. So
I'd be
there's
willing
a-
to make a motion.
if
What I was
there's an
asking is
interest-
how to move it forward.
Oh, by motion, yes, absolutely. I'm sorry, President Russell. There's also the item of updating the calendar for the May 3rd meeting.
And how do we move forward on that one?
a motion to revise the calendar thusly as well. So we could do those as two separate items. We could make entertain a motion to adopt the revised calendar, vote on that, and then entertain a motion to adjust the start time of the meetings, and then let that one proceed.
And why was the May meeting moved to begin with?
The May meeting was originally scheduled on May 10th instead of May 3rd because of the Aqua conference.
Aqua, that's what I thought. Okay,
That's right.
okay, cool. Well,
Okay.
I'm willing, okay, if someone else will do it, it's better, but I'm happy to do it if no one will.
What do you want a motion for that we
Let's
change?
go with the May 3rd to May 10 to May 3rd first.
Okay. That's my motion.
Second.
Roll call.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Kohler,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Bragman,
I'm sorry, I don't really understand is it to move the meeting to May 10th or to May 3rd?
No, it's on May 10th. It's going to move it to May 3rd. So we can open up May 10th for a different meeting.
Aye.
and President Russell.
Aye. Okay, now we need a motion to consider the 7:30 start time instead of the 7, if there is one, and if there isn't, I'll make one.
Okay, I'll move that we have a start time of our regular meeting at 7:30.
Second.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Kohler,
No.
Director Schmidt,
Aye. It's a half hour.
Director Bragman,
Aye.
Director Russell.
Aye. Okay.
Can I maybe say with this, what kind of got my change there was if our special sessions could actually happen before, if we move to 7:30, starting a closed session at the end of the night, I think is just strikes me as more difficult. And so if this is an accommodation that allows us to, when we do have closed sessions, to not now have those happen afterwards, but rather keep them as something that happens in advance, I think that is better management of all the things that we need to cover. And if the public's not weighing in with a preference one way or the other, that I think makes more sense.
I agree. I'll just say that if the closed sessions are going to be after, then I will not be attending. I have very early morning meetings. So Larry's and my schedules are off. I just do a lot of meetings with people back east. So if we're starting at 7:30, I'm going to be done by 10. I will not be able to participate after 10. I'm just saying.
Well, of course, that's an interesting point too, Cynthia. There are meetings that adjourn at a given time. That's something we might consider down the path here.
Okay.
Instead of letting the thing run free form, is just say that if we're going to run past that time, we just re-agendize that item at the end instead of just keep going and going and going like the Energizer Bunny. I think that's something that I would like to see in the future as a consideration. I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
And just to comment, Monty, the advantage of the after the meeting time is that there's no ending time. So you go as long as you need to go in terms of the closed session, not the public side of it, but the private side of it. So anyway, that's the reason for them, is that when you run them in front, you have the 7 o'clock, or 7:30.
Yeah.
That's where you get jammed. You haven't seen too much of that yet, but it happens.
Well, when the closed sessions followed the meeting, they were generally very short. I mean, literally, they were very short. When they come at the front of the meeting, we fill the time allotted. Yeah.
I do remember some that went pretty long though, Jack, some closed sessions.
Very rarely. I mean, we had a couple.
Yeah.
Very rarely. I mean, most of them would take 5 minutes. And
we're motivated.
Yeah.
We're motivated. I agree. Okay, well, enough of the chit chat. Item 13, future meeting schedule.
Good evening. So just remind the Board of Directors, Tuesday, April 26th is the Strategic Water Supply Assessment Working Session. And then on the 28th is our Finance and Administration Committee Board of Directors meeting. Then external meetings, the Tamales Bay Watershed Foundation meeting is Wednesday, April 20th. The North Bay Water Reuse Authority Board meetings, April 25th. And the Sonoma WACTAC meeting is Monday, May 2nd.
And by the way, I received a notice, I suppose whoever gets it also received it, that the WAC-TAC meeting is going to be in person only, which is they're doing away with the Zoom.
Wow. Optimistic.
Or crazy. Okay, with that, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you all.
Okay, night
Take
all.
care.
Thanks
See
a
ya.
lot.
Good
Bye-bye.
night.